Hello everyone. Welcome back. I'm not dead. No, I'm not just a voice on the wind. Wait, hang on. I think I turned down my microphone a little bit. Okay, there we go. I think it should be back to normal. I'm not dead. I promise. I promise I'm not dead. Okay, hang on. Sound-wise, it's slightly off. Hmm. Let me just ever so gently. Hello? There we go. I think that should be a little bit better. For some reason it was oddly low. I must have hit something earlier. Not too sure. Am I a zombie? I am quite pale, so I think I'm less of a zombie and possibly more of a vampire. Which means you guys have to invite me over and I can't cross over running water apparently. It kind of makes it difficult to bathe because like if the water is flowing at all, it's like insta death. Can't even get into a tub because then the water sloshes about and it like disintegrates a vampire. It's so bad. Thankfully, I'm not a zombie or a vampire, so I feel like a zombie wouldn't do well in running water either, wouldn't it? The sun is a problem too. That's why I only come out at night. They only come out at night. The lean and hungry type. Wait, what's that? What's that again? Hang on. That's Hall and Oates. Hall and Oates. Man eater. She'll only come out at night. The lean and hungry type. Nothing is new. I've seen her here before. Watching and waiting. Oh, she's sitting with you, but her eyes are on the door. So many have paid to see what you think you're getting for free. The woman is wild, she can't tamed by the purr of a jaguar. Money's a matter, if you're in it for love, you ain't gonna get too far. Oh, here she comes, watch out boy, she'll chew you up. Oh, here she comes, she's a man-eater. Oh, what a tune, what a great tune. Oh no, you have so many questions, copyright. Start throwing them out. I don't mind at all. But yes, we will be returning to our little reading about Philip in probably a small while, a little while. I usually chat for about 10 to 15 minutes or so. We're coming actually near to the end of the book. I think we still have a little bit more to go. We probably won't finish. If I make good time, we will finish in the next 2 streams, I think, which will bring us up to about 15 streams on one book. To be fair, this was quite a big book, which kind of not a big book, but the pages were quite wide, and the text wasn't too small. So you know, I think we made some decent pace. There was a few times where I bowed out. I answered one. I answered one. Okay, I don't know. At some point I answered it. Maybe it was the. I guess the "Are you a zombie" one was a question technically. I am emphatically not a zombie. Ignore the rotting flesh of my hand. The answer, the wound bite, the bite wound, I should say, not the wound bite. I'm mixing up terms. But yeah, I think if I get about 20-ish pages done today, or at least I get to the end of this chapter, and possibly even into the beginning of the next, we'll definitely finish in at about 2 streams. If I really went crazy, I could maybe finish it in one, but not happening. When are you doing a karaoke stream? Uh, well, for one, on the first question, I don't know. I did one recently enough, so I can imagine maybe doing it. There is a possibility of doing it this weekend, or at the very least, the weekend after. I think either of those is probably the plan. It depends on what's happening. In regards to, do I look like my character? Well, copyright. I don't know what you mean by character. I am Ruadh. I am Ruadh Uquilta. And what I'm saying there is I do not give out any sort of personal information. And many VTubers, I think, these days people are a lot more open about, like, the real person. You'll often see VTubers posting themselves. You'll see VTubers posting their hands or their feet, or even just full body, the avatar or the person who they play supposedly. Um, Ultimately, it's sort of like just a thing for you to. Oh no, not at all copyright. I don't mind at all. But those type of questions are fine. Um, I just think I'm one of those people who prefers that certain info about myself isn't divulged. Even though I have every now and again, I've certainly divulged certain information, but I'm sure maybe there is probably someone out there with a whiteboard or a like a big wall full of like all this different information, all these different links and threads connecting different points. They're gonna figure out what my shoe size is soon, or like my like pants length, and they're gonna find out who I am. Oh yeah, no, not at all, not at all. I understand. It's something that can be very easy to let slip. I do think it's interesting how that kind of, I want to say, tradition, or I guess that culture around VTubing, which I think is still very strong in Japan, but it's certainly in the West. It's very much going away, of people playing into kayfabe. They don't reveal who they are. Not even playing into kayfabe, just simply remaining anonymous, or kind of people respecting personal lives and roommates, so to say. Hello, son Albionus. Welcome in, my long blonde-haired Roman friend. I hope you're doing well. Reading some. I thought you were reading some Socrates, some dubious authorship ones. Hola, ¿qué tal? Oh, languages. I don't think Son speaks Spanish. I think he just used hola. But welcome in, Mr. Albionus. We're going to be doing a little bit of reading on Philip in a small while. We're about to get in. We've been kind of covering. Oh God, what happened? What happened last stream? I've suddenly gone completely blank. Oh yes, Philip attempted to take Byzantium and Perinthus, and primarily he was looking to, which are on the edge of Thrace, essentially. He wanted this because he wanted to have full control over the Thracian kind of headland, because he was worried, on one hand, about Athens. Essentially, he wanted to kind of squeeze Athens a little bit more. They had many cities around there, so I don't know really. No worries, I'll give maybe a brief discussion. He wanted to squeeze Athens a little bit more because they were getting a little bit rowdy. They were starting to face off against him. They were breaking the peace of Philocrates, but Philip didn't want to be the one to officially declare war. He always wants to paint himself in the best light and have what is, in his view, the will of the gods on his side. So he was going to be able to target the Athenian grain fleet, which was very, very important for them, as well as kind of take over a couple of the Athenian cities in that region. Perinthus and Byzantium being primarily the main. Well, actually, no, mainly Byzantium, I would say. Perinthus, actually, I think wasn't necessarily a strategic importance. I think maybe they were possibly flirting a little bit with Athens, and Philip just couldn't take it. Possibly one of the few mistakes he's made. But it did allow him to capture the Athenian grain fleet and make a killing, making more than a year of the Athenians' GDP. I imagined myself replying, but I never actually replied. I'm truly losing the plot. Oh no, son, you're doing too much thinking. Today I read a real one, Shamides, or On Temperance. I have not read that one. I haven't read that many Plato books, to be quite honest. I think I've read more books. No, I've read enough Plato to be able to say that I haven't read more books about Plato than just of Plato. Uh, 15 minutes later. I don't mind at all copyright. If you want to eep, that's totally fine. It's both easy and difficult. Yeah, it's like sometimes it can be the most simplest, easy to follow arguments, whether you agree with them or not, and sometimes it's Parmenides, where you don't know what he's saying every single line. Republican laws are each about nearly 300 pages. Those will be difficult. Republic is. It was definitely a bit of a slog at times, but there was also, and I would love to reread the Republic with the level, at least what I like to think is a much grander knowledge or level of knowledge that I have these days. Even just from the perspective of understanding some of the underlying concepts and ideas that he was giving out, not just like the base. Oh, this is Plato's theories of forms, but the much grander, unified kind of vision of Platonism and what he was trying to do. Um, I I have a few books that go into that. I have one quite short one. It's kind of like that. It's easy to read something that's only like 30 pages. You can speed read it either in a day or two, and it's grand. And then you can possibly watch a lecture or two on it if you want to get a bit of extra depth into it. But I have a few books that go deep into it. Um, he's similar to the pre-Socratics than we give him credit for. Well, I think I explained this to you before, Socrates. Um, Plato, at least from a grand metaphysical perspective, was seeking to fix the issues of the pre-Socratics, at least what he saw as the pre-Socratic issues, that of the Heraclitean all is change, and the Parmenides all is one. Now there was others who did this, and I know the oh god, what are they called? The mathematical guys. Why can't I remember the word for it? Is his main thing. He's interested in all sorts of things. He really is. Yeah, he's it takes until Aristotle for Aristotle to kind of designate the certain areas of philosophy. But Plato was definitely one of the people who really took a broad look at almost everything. Um, Aristotle came in then with metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, politics, and art. Was it one of his art? I think it was. Um, but I think what I might do for some of my books, they're quite long, is I might try and summarize them, or even I've considered doing like excerpts of the Republic where I kind of just talk about it and just kind of give my not an opinion, but just kind of an overview of it rather than reading the book itself. Like I'd read parts of it. I might read specifically the Ring of Gyges or the Theory of Caves. That he's an avid a priori enthusiast. Shut up, nerd. Using words like a priori. Hello, Kwai. Hello. Who is that? Who is that? Why is that person bald? Oh, they're not. They are bald. They're so bald that they have to wear like sunglasses to stop the gleam from hitting our eyes. Wounds 5-head. Ah, I see. It's a 5-head emote. That makes sense. That's me. Your forehead is like you have it's like that because you have a big brain. Had he given science natural philosophy thing a second chance, we might surely be living on Mars by now. I don't I feel like that's reaching into the whole like, what do you call it? Christianity held science back by 1,000 years dark hole of Christianity theory, which is, I mean, I don't need to pull up the meme image. I mean, Aristotle especially did that, but like there were just certain aspects of things that they couldn't even like. I remember I recently saw something, the Finno-Korean hyperwar. Exactly. I mean, if you were not a Finno Empire enthusiast, what are you even doing? Happy Friday, quite. Technically, it's still Thursday for me. So that's painful. But I hope you're having a good Friday. I do have Monday off though, so that's gonna be sweet. I'm gonna have to check because I think I may have a short Friday, but unfortunately, I think something may have gone wrong with the codes, and we might not get that for some reason. So we're gonna have to work a full day, and everyone else is gonna get a half day, which is bullshit. I'm gonna be so angry about it, especially because I have to work up overtime for stuff, and it's gonna be like, if they wanted me to work a full day tomorrow, they could at least give me that, like, give me the half day, and I'll work the full day and use that as overtime. I don't mind. But really, the more I read through Plato, the less interest I have in the later mystical Neoplatonist stuff. See, that's where you and I think, differ, son. For me, the metaphysical aspects, the discussions on what essentially later becomes Aristotle's prime mover, Plotinus's Enads. Who else was it? Was it Proclus? I think it was Proclus who brings in. No, I think I'm mixing up. Later on, Christian philosophy, then, or even just broad theistic philosophy of Maimonides, Avenica, Thomas Aquinas with Thomism, and the kind of conjoining and the. I had the same experience with the Bible, and I found it thoroughly not metaphorical. Son is a literalist. You read text and it's like, nope, there's no further meaning behind this. But I think that there is. So like one thing I might like to do, is take the allegory of the cave, for example, and kind of give a broader discussion on that and the way it kind of feeds into, and so some of the lessons behind that you later see in Neoplatonism. Or at least my understanding. I haven't actually read many of the Neoplatonists. I would say that I've more read modern scholarship on these works that tie these things together. Which, hang on, let me take a quick look. Yeah, so I have works like Lloyd P. Gearson's Platonism series, or Platonism versus Naturalism series, which I would highly recommend. I want to get into modern philosophers like Descartes onwards, but I do think it would be good to at least touch on people that come in between. But there's a lot of stuff. Yeah, they're like, I mean, it's a lot. And honestly, it's too much to focus on any one thing. I suppose it would just depend on what your city. I have the City of God on my bookshelf. I haven't read it yet. It's really long. If you are looking for a commentary on Aquinas, though, hang on. Let me check my bookshelf very quickly. Okay, so Philip II, the greatest Slav. The Summa Teleologica is excessively long, and I want to read it, but it is quite long. Not even his main book, isn't it? Does he have another one that's the Summa Contra Gentile? Yeah, the Summa Contra Gentile, which is explicably trying to convert others. I have a few recommendations that you could try in regards to Platonic. Hello, Golden Faking. Welcome in. We will be doing reading. I'm gonna answer Son on this. I suppose, Son, if you ever want to do like a either a collab type stream where we just talk and I can explain Thomistic philosophy, or at least aspects of it that I understand, because there's still a lot of it that there's so many little intricacies, but I can explain some of like the influences that it takes from both sides, especially the conjoining of Platonic participation, the way it considers forms from an Aristotelian perspective, and how it builds off of those two. At the very least, you'd be able to be like, okay, yeah, I understand a little bit of it. But people like Edward Fesser, or hang on. Yeah, I suppose there's Edward Fesser. I'm currently reading a book that's specifically which might actually be a good one. I might send that on to you later because I don't know where it is. Hello, Golden Faking. Thank you so much for the first time chat. Welcome, welcome in. I like the name, Golden Faking. It's very, very nice. I think I will have to read the rest of Plato and Aristotle's main works first, though. I see, I see. You probably would. You've probably read more of them than I have at this point. Um, but I think that would be an interesting little stream. We could talk about prime moving and substance and accident, active and passive or whatever. No, active and potentiality and all that good stuff. It came to me in a dream, actually. You know what? Based dream believers. Like honestly, that's source. I had it in a dream. I dreamed about this. That's how we should do everything. How could I possibly read anything by a man who calls Aristotle the philosopher without having read Aristotle's works myself? Makes sense. Makes sense. But in saying that, and I would recommend Aristotle's Metaphysics, I suppose. I think, well, obviously, you're probably not much interested in that, actually. That's not your area of interest. It certainly is mine. And I read it specifically because I wanted to get a better understanding of Thomism. But in saying that, I think it's time I finally get on to our reading. So as I was mentioning earlier, how's old Philip doing? Hello, D. I think he's about to do pretty well because we're about to get into the fight between him and Athens. Truly, the proper fight. They came to some close blows, or almost kind of like Cold War fighting, but it was Philip was actually doing the fighting against Perinthus and Byzantium. Then Philip kind of just went on a bit of a just dealing with a couple of tribal people in the north because they're annoying. You haven't found Metaphysics yet. I'm sure it could be pretty easy to find. Organon and the rest of his ethics books. I bet you're looking for his some really old editions on, like, you'll see like the Penguin Classics version and you're like, no, get it away from me, burn it. And then you're like, oh, here's one that's like 500 years old and was owned by by Descartes himself. Actually the opposite. I'm jealous at crummy Penguin paperbacks. I know that pain. I do have a couple of nice ones though, but I often get very jelly of your book collections. But let's get into the actual reading, and I will drop down my voice now to be a little bit more relaxing. I think. I hope you all enjoy. The Prelude to War. When Philip arrived in Pella, he confronted two major problems. First, just prior to his return, the Thebans ejected the Macedonian garrison at Nicaea, the key town controlling the route through the Thermopylae Pass, and occupied the town themselves. Philip had controlled Nicaea since the peace of 346 BC, and Thebes and Macedonia were still considered allies. Thebes' sudden and ominous seizure of Nicaea blocked the direct route to Attica and Athens. Thebes took the strategic town out of concern that, with Athens and Philip now officially at war, Philip was bound to act sooner or later. The road to Attica ran through Boeotia and Thebes, and the Thebans already had good reason to distrust Philip's ambitions. They occupied Nicaea so that they could bargain with Philip to ensure their own security. If Philip had designed on Thebes as well as Athens, the Thebans were in a better position to resist with Nicaea in their hands. Have to buy a second copy of Plutarch's work recently. The one you already had was in such horrendous prose. Yeah, you can sometimes buy editions and it's like, there's no way I can even understand what's happening. Macedon and Thebes as allies. Oh, the irony. I don't think that's exactly what's happening here. I think they're worried that he does have. There was times when they did join together, certainly, such as the Sacred War, Thebes versus Phocas. But in this case, they've kicked out the Macedonian garrison from Nicaea, a little town just a little bit away from the Thermopylae Pass. But yes, certainly foreshadowing a certain city's destruction by Philip's good son. Philip's second problem concerned the Amphictyonic Council, which had been engaged in a year-long dispute with the Locrian town of Amphissa over some supposed illegal and sacrilegious cultivation of sacred lands. After much maneuvering, Amphissa was fined, and Cottyphus, a Thessalian, was appointed commander of the Amphictyonic forces to enforce the fine. When Cottius arrived in Amphissa with only a token force, the Amphicians refused to pay, and he was driven off by Amphician troops. I'm surprised that they would be they just saw Phocas be absolutely destroyed and demolished. And sure, in a massive war, but these guys are willing to take on the Amphictyonic Council. At the autumn meeting of the Amphictyonic Council, a sacred war was declared against Amphissa. It removed the ineffective Cottyphus from command of the League's forces and appointed Philip in his place, with the expectation that Philip would punish Amphissa with military force. The Macedonian army, however, had been in the field far more than a year before returning to Pella in the summer of 339 BC. It was in no major condition to wage war with Amphissa, and certainly not to engage in a major campaign against Athens. Throughout the summer and early fall of 339 BC, Philip recuperated from his leg wound and rested, and replenished his army. Philip's primary strategic concern was the war with Athens, and he needed to carefully assess the politico-military environment in which the war would be fought. Philip had spent years casting himself as a reasonable man who fought war only reluctantly. The fact that Athens had declared war on Philip now served him well. Athens found itself almost politically and militarily isolated. Not a single Peloponnesian state supported Athens. Its allies in Euboea refused to help. A few of the maritime states in the east stood with Athens, but only in spirit, since it was unlikely that the allies in the Hellespont region could do much militarily in mainland Greece. Acarnania remained faithful, but its contribution was offset by the stance of its more powerful neighbour, Aetolia. The Aetolians supported Philip because he promised to liberate Naupactus from the Acarnanians and give it to them. The Locrians, for their part, had no love for Athens, and Phocas was already in the Macedonian camp. And for those of you who may not remember, Philip had defeated the Phocians alongside Thebes in the Sacred War, but he was one of the few people who pushed and effectively used his influence to prevent Phocas from being slaughtered, the Phocians in general, and had been slowly pushing for Phocian towns and even their main city of Phocas to be allowed to be rebuilt. So they certainly see him as sort of a savior. The Athenians' only hope for a military alliance lay with Thebes, its traditional enemy. The strategic situation was complicated, however, by Persia. Philip's attack on Byzantium had provoked a Persian military response into Thrace, a clear indication that Persia was now regarded Philip as a long-range threat to its security. Although withdrawing troops once Philip broke off the siege of Byzantium and rebuffing an earlier Athenian request for an alliance, the Persians sent money to Athens to prosecute its war with Philip. Persia's actions made it very difficult for Philip to assess its intentions. If Philip marched into Athens, would Persia march into Thrace? And if so, would the Persian army, as it had done before, march overland through Thrace and attack Macedonia itself? With the Macedonian army tied down in Attica and Persia marching through Thrace, what would Thebes do? Philip's answers to these questions resulted in a military campaign based on precise timings and strategic deception. They should have called it Macedonia. It would sound way cooler that way. Macedonia is already enough of a mouthful. Macedonia is it's too much, son. Oh, with the C as a K. Macedonia. I actually prefer the K sound. I prefer Macedon and Macedonia. Macedonia is actually, yeah, that does sound pretty good. It's just, I think, for reading this, Lacedaemoniae, it is. Sparta was already a decadent power at this point, if you remember correctly. You do remember correctly. They had pretty much exhausted their military manpower against Athens and Thebes, and in the Peloponnesian War, and then later in the later Thebes Athens wars, the kind of continuation of the Peloponnesian Wars, really, but they're treated as separate. And while they still had that reputation, they simply just didn't have enough Spartan men. And it was always the case that Sparta relied on their suppression of the native area people of kind of their area, having come from one of the islands. I can't remember exactly which one. But the Spartans, they only ever pulled from their military, the kind of elite, and over time they were just whittled it down. They didn't have if they had Abe. If they had Abe there, he could have told them to have sex, and they would have had more children. But it didn't happen, and Sparta slowly got pushed out by Athens. They still had enough weight though. They still were a force like you wouldn't want to be facing them, because I think they had like half of Lacedaemon under their control. Philip was appointed commander of the Amphictyonic League's armies in the early autumn of 339 BC. In November, the Macedonian army, the League's forces, and the Aetolians assembled at Lamia, 9 miles from Thermopylae, and prepared to move south. Legally, Philip was commanding an Amphictyonic alliance in service to the League's council's mandate to punish Amphissians for their sacrilege and refusal to pay the council's fine. Most of the alliance's troops were Macedonian and Thessalian, did not raise any alarm in either Thebes or Athens. Apparently both saw Philip's march south as a limited and temporary military operation against Amphissa. Marching in the name and the authority of the Amphictyones was a brilliant strategic deception on Philip's part, and it lulled the only 2 states capable of opposing his ambitions in Greece into taking no steps to oppose him. At the same time, Philip also deceived the Persians, who were watching his actions closely. The Thebans may have believed that their control of the Nicaea and the Thermopylae Pass would protect them should Philip reveal a hostile intent. To further this illusion, Philip did not try to force the pass or seek permission to use it. Instead, marching west from Lamia, Philip's army ascended the narrow pass between Mount Oeta and Mount Calidromus, and entered the territory of the High Canton of Doris, which was a member of the Amphictyonic League and Philip's ally. Philip marched quickly to the city of Cytinium, where he established his logistics base. Cytinium was only 6 miles from the Gravia Pass, which led south to Amphissa, Philip's presumed objective. Philip did not, however, seize the mount of the pass. To this point, Philip did exactly what he said he would do. Maybe if they spent their efforts turning the Helots into Spartans instead of bullying them, they would have been stronger. Just poorly trained. Yeah, I think they were there as just kind of like meat grinders. Or like meat shield, essentially. Like, we'll just use these guys here and there. But yeah, they treated the Helots kind of meanly, but like their society was built on the Helots just doing all the manual labor, and then they were able to go and be Spartan-y boys. Lycurgus had an interesting style. Suddenly, Philip's army swung east, marched into focus, down the Cephissus River valley, and occupied Elatea, the Phocian capital. The Amphictyonic League was disarmed and split up focus at the end of the Sacred War. The Amphictyonic League had disarmed and split up focus at the end of the Sacred War, and thus it was in no position to resist Philip's occupation. More importantly, however, Focus strongly sympathized with Philip, for, after all, he had been the one on the Amphictyonic Council who had kept the country from being destroyed and its males exterminated. Philip had also reduced the council's heavy fines and lifted the restrictions on rebuilding the Phocian cities. By this time, Elatea itself was almost completely rebuilt. Philip's reasonable treatment of Focus after the Sacred War had paid huge dividends. He counted on them to provide the winter quarters and supplies his armies needed while it was in the field. You're here. Hello, Angale. Welcome in, welcome in. Thank you very much for joining us. Philip's deception permitted him to place a large army close to Boeotian borders. He also controlled the road that led through Boeotia to Attica and over Athens. Philip's army was only 3 days' march from Athens' walls. Philip had caught Athens and Thebes completely by surprise. Neither had called up their citizen levies, and it would take several days at the earliest for them to do so. Neither was in a position to stop Philip. For his part, Philip could march through Boeotia, bypassing Thebes, ravage Attica, and drive the Athenians inside their walls, where they would be completely cut off from outside aid. In a matter of a few weeks, he could have destroyed Athens. Despite holding every advantage, however, Philip did not advance beyond Iliate. Instead, he sent a delegation comprising Macedonians and members of the Amphictyonic League to Thebes to negotiate his free passage southward. The delegation's composition makes clear that Philip presented his actions as representing the will of the Amphictyonic League, which was conducting a sacred war. Philip's... It's a Elate. Elatea. Sorry, sometimes I know, son, you're probably like, it's pronounced this way. Sometimes I'm not very good at these names. I missed you and everyone else. Oh, I missed you too, Angel. Thank you very much for joining. I hope you've been well. Oh, not Elia. Rip. No, this is focuses like kind of capital city. Parmenides, bros. I think that's like all the way over on the like the Persian coast, isn't it? I think that was like how they split. You had like the Eleatics, all like, I'm sticking to the end while you eat my burger, or while you eat your burger, not eat my burger. Don't eat my burgers. I like burgers. Elia city. Oh no, wait, sorry. I'm getting completely mixed up. Son. I'm getting completely mixed up. Elia was like in Italy apparently. Your burger, yes, enjoy your burger. I hope it's a nice big juicy one. You could go for a burger. Get your own, you're not sharing. Unfortunately. Aww. Magna Greca. Italian Greek holidays. I think that is correct. You could go for a burger though, D. I think that's a pretty good plan. Pretty good plan. Philip's envoys. Oh, sorry, hang on. Philip's envoys proposed that Thebes relinquish its hold on Nicaea and return the town to the Locrians as proper owner. The Thebans offered to consider the idea. Philip's envoys then requested the Boeotians join the league in attacking Athens. In return, Thebes would receive all the booty taken from the city. If Thebes and the Boeotian League did not wish to participate in the demise of Athens, Philip proposed they remain neutral, but allow his army free passage through their territory on the way to Athens. The choice was simple, at least in Philip's view. Philip approached Thebes diplomatically because he understood the situation was militarily complex. Thebes and the Boeotian League commanded the largest and best trained army in Greece. Acting in concert, they could put 12,000 infantry and 800 cavalry in the field. Without their consent, a march through Boeotia and an attack on Athens would leave a powerful military force at Philip's back and across his line of communications. Although Thebes and Macedonia were technically allies, there were hard feelings between the two, and neither completely trusted the other. If Philip besieged Athens, he would be particularly vulnerable to a Theban attack that could crush him between the Theban army and the walls of Athens. Philip halted his march because he dared not proceed without first learning what Thebes' intentions were. The news of Philip's occupation of Elatea sent Athens into shock, and a hastily convened meeting of the assembly resulted in Demosthenes leading a delegation to Thebes to seek an alliance against Philip. The delegation reached Thebes to discover that Philip's envoys were already there. The Athenians must have been stunned by Philip's offer to allow Thebes to pillage Athens and keep the booty for themselves. Both sides presented their cases. Thebes held the future of Greece in its hands. If it supported Philip, Athens was doomed. Sooner or later, however, Macedonia and Thebes would have to fight for preeminence in Greece. A future war was simply inevitable. For Thebes to support Athens required that it break its alliance with Philip. Should it choose a losing side, Thebes would likely face the same harsh fate that Olynthos suffered when it broke its treaty with Philip, went to war with him and lost. It saw its entire population enslaved and its city obliterated. Thebes could expect no less if it chose poorly. Nonetheless, the Theban leaders reached a conclusion that they had a better chance of defeating Philip in alliance with Athens than facing him alone after Athens was destroyed. They renounced their treaty with Philip and voted to ally themselves with Athens. But Thebes did not risk its existence cheaply. It demanded numerous conditions at the price of its support. Pythagoras came from there too, and the Romans were so embarrassed about not knowing this at the time that they later wrote revisionist history fan fiction where they did appreciate him. What? I never heard of this. I never heard of this. I know, that was who I was thinking of, by the way. Apparently, Plato was often called a Pythagorean. He spent a lot of some time in Italy. But I never heard about this revisionist history fan fiction. That's so funny. But yes, he was from Syracuse. Supposedly he died in a siege, I think. Was it another one of their great engineers? Debt raids before they were cool. I'd say even in his day they were like, that was pretty cool. He died by not crossing a field of beans. Okay, I think I'm thinking of a completely different person, so. Athens was to forgo any future support for the autonomy of any Boeotian city, in effect recognizing Theban hegemony over Boeotia. Regarding the war effort, Thebes would bear 1/3 of the land war's cost, and Athens would assume the rest. Further, Thebes demanded sole command of the allied land armies. Although Athens would bear the entire cost of the naval operations, both states would share the command. Finally, the combined armies' headquarters were to be located at Thebes, not Athens. To have any chance of survival, Athens would have to pay the Thebans' price. Philip was now at war with Athens and Thebes, and the alliance changed his military calculations considerably. His attempt to neutralize Theban military power through diplomacy had cost Philip the element of surprise and the momentum he had gained with his rapid march and seizure of Elatea. He may have also believed that if he had been able to achieve an alliance with Thebes, or at least its neutrality, then Athens would have little choice but to come to a diplomatic agreement to avoid the defeat that would certainly follow a war with Philip. Diplomacy failed, and with it went his military advantages. Athens and Thebes were rapidly mobilizing their armies and had begun deploying them into forward positions to block Philip's advance. It was December and winter was setting in. If Philip attacked now, they would have to fight a winter campaign against an enemy that had the advantage of interior supply lines. Thebes and Athens could retreat before him, taking refuge in their fortified cities, while Philip's armies operated at the end of extended lines of supply. If Philip stayed in Elatea with his logistic base at Scythium, both supplied by the friendly Phocians, he could wait out the winter in relative comfort and security. His remaining in Elatea would force the Thebans and Athenians to deploy their forces forward, placing them at the end of an extended supply line. It made sound military sense for Philip to wait until spring to begin the winter war's combat phase. Waiting also served Philip's interest, in that the slow pace of unfolding events worked to calm Persian anxieties over Philip's ambitions. Whatever was happening in Greece was happening gradually, reducing any Persian perception that things were getting out of hand. The Persians' eyes, Philip appeared to be just another Greek king pursuing his interests in the same manner Greek kings, tyrants, and oligarchs had done for centuries. Both the Thebans and Athenians called up their troops, while Philip was still conducting negotiations with them. Once the sides were drawn, allied units began to take up positions to block Philip's advance. The Boeotian and Athenian troops deployed on the Boeotian frontier near the town of Parapotami, where the Cephissus River flowed through a narrow gap between the spur of Mount Parnassus on the west, and Mount Helicon on the east. This deployment effectively barred Philip's route to Chaeronea, for the narrow pass made using his cavalry impossible. Two smaller passes connecting these positions with the Allied garrisons protecting Amphissa to the east were also fortified. 6 miles from Philip's main logistic base at Cytinium was the opening to the Gravia Pass in the road over the mountains that led to Amphissa 12 miles away. A force of 10,000 mercenaries led by the Athenian general Chares was deployed to protect Amphissa. Operational command of the mercenaries, however, rested with Proxenus, a Theban general. Eagles dropping rocks on their bald heads, falling down wells, not crossing bean fields, bumping into bronze vessels at night, diving into volcanoes. I feel like the last one is a little bit like that's kind of on their fault. It's kind of on their fault. I hate how Achaemenid Middle East was actually quite stable and peaceful just to be conquered. A stable, what a feat. What a feat. But yeah, they got caught at an unfortunate time, if I remember correctly. They were kind of still recovering from things, and suddenly Alexander appears and he's like, "Hello, give me." Empedocles, the noble soul. Well, you know what? Dived straight into Mount Etna, roasted whole. Just. Oh, you know what? You know what? I hope he enjoyed the warm lava bath. Diadochi shit show starts. Bye bye stability. Where were we? The Allied forces effectively blocked the only two routes leading south that were available to Philip. Let me actually see if there's an image of this. Ah, there is. Excellent. Hang on. Let me take a photo real quick, and I will get back to the reading. I forgot to take this photo, but it shouldn't take too long. I hope everyone's having a good Thursday evening or day, or even a Friday. Oh. I'm really popular if you guys hear my notifications going off. How did I take photos before? I did it really easily the last few times, and suddenly it's really awkward. Did I get it? I did. Excellent. I have to make sure nothing is showing that I don't want to be shown. Yeah, that's decent. Ancient Irish warrior tries to figure out camera. I don't understand it. I pointed at a thing and it captures that thing. It sounds dangerous. What if it captures me? What if it captures my soul? In like this little square. This square box. It's clearly the devil's work. It's clearly the work of Balor. The one-eyed. Oh wait, hang on, I have to upload it. I took the photo, I opened the drive, and I never uploaded it. So I was just looking for a non-photo that didn't exist. Okay, that should be... that should have worked. There we go. Now I can... I get to use my pointer again, yay! Ooh. It shall capture your soul. Click. This is going in my cringe collection. Puts you in like the Necronomicon. What's wrong with my pointer? It's a great little pointer. It's like green text. Transparent picture of an arrow for mine. Well, son, mine's clearly better. Because like if you say something, I can then immediately go like, hang on, transparent picture of an arrow, Lamau. See, now I win because I just responded to your point, and like I'm making fun of you now. Like you just lost the argument. See, it's like when I can also make you the soy boy, and I'll make me the Chad. I'll make you so I win. Yeah, you just repeat back to them what they said, and then it's like you won. Big photo. There we go. Now you guys, it's like you're trying to jump over the words. Yeah, there's this story that one of the tasks of the Fianna to become a Fianna, you had to jump over a branch that was taller than you, from a standing position. So it's like I had to jump over the green text, the green arrow. You're not tall enough, Delphi, my beloved. It was ransacked. It was ransacked by the Phocians. We should rebuild things. I often think there's a lot of old castles in Ireland that are kind of decrepit. Like they're looked after, but it's like there's one, the Rock of Cashel, that there's just a big piece of stone that fell off during a storm recently. Not recently, but like a while back. It's just sitting there, and like I think we should rebuild these things. Oh, but I don't care. I don't care. Rebuild it to as best as you can guess. Maybe leave the original site untouched, but like maybe a couple of miles to the site. That might be a decent idea. Waiting to be rebuilt. I know, I know. Imagine if we just rebuilt a bunch of like old things. It'd be so cool. But I think this might be giving you guys a little bit of a better idea of what's actually happening. Uh, so here's Elatia, or Elatia, where Philip has held up Thebes, and Athens is down here in this direction. But I think you can see here that there's something happening here. Cheronia, which is the battle that's going to be fought at the end. It's quite an important one. There was another battle of Cheronia, I'm quite sure, or Cheronia. Son, please help me with pronunciation. Um, but we literally rebuild the Pantheon and just paint it too. Yeah, yeah. Honestly, it would be way cooler. You are a beautiful slab of marble. I shall use this hammer to mold you into a masterpiece. We could do it, and we could make it. But I think though, son, we'd have to do it by hand. No, like we'd have to do it like them. Sure, it might take years, but like has has to have that same energy. That same has to as quickly and confidently as possible and make it seem like you understand how to pronounce it. That's a genius idea. I'm gonna do that from now on. K k k Kef- Kefus Fisi Valley. Nailed it. Nailed it. You guys totally believe that one. Here we were. Oh yeah. It made sound sense for Philip to wait until spring to begin the war's combat phase. Waiting also Philip... Yeah, we read this. To Persian eyes, Philip appeared to be just another Greek king pursuing his interests in the same manner Greek kings, tyrants, and oligarchs had done before for all centuries. Uh, the Boeotian... Oh wait, hang on, we read this, yeah. Proxenus and the group holding at Amphissa, which is just down... Ooh, my pointer. Just down here. Can't see. The Allied forces effectively blocked the only two routes leading south that were available to Philip. There were difficulties, however. The Allied supply lines were long, running from Thebes to Amphissa and Parapotami through mountains and narrow passes easily closed by foul weather. checked out Tobete Goblin. His art is very, very, very good. Very anatomical. Also, actually, hang on, let me do... I'm going to shout out a couple of people. Wait, can I do shout outs very quickly? Shout out... Oh, I have to wait 2 minutes before doing it again. Oh, it's disaster, disaster. Are we talking about ancient people being awful again? Pretty much. We're talking about a war that's currently happening. Well, we were before you came in and was like thighs. Well, no, I had a phone call that disrupted me, but everything is good again. Even knives. Eh? Oh, thank you for the stretch redeem, Tuete. There we go. The most immediate threat to Athens was Philip's ability to carry out a ground attack against the Allies, and Athens acted correctly in deploying its ground forces to stop it. What was lacking in the Athenian strategy, however, was any naval component to augment its ground operations. Athens was still the preeminent naval power in Greece, and could send more than 300 triremes transporting significant land forces, or easily 5,000 hoplites to war. With Philip's army ensconced in Elatiae, his route of advance blocked, one wonders why Athens did not bring its navy into play by mobilizing its manpower reserves and using its ships to strike at Philip's strategic rear. Athens had the capability to conduct naval assaults in the Thermaic Gulf and against Philip's ports in Chalcidides. Athenian naval infantry could have even attacked the coast of Macedonia itself. With Philip's army in the field, the Macedonian coast was defenseless. Naval attacks might have to force Philip to break off his campaign and to return home to defend Macedonia. The subject of naval operations must surely have been raised when Thebes and Athens discussed their alliance agreement, and Athens agreed to bear the entire cost of naval operations and to share the command of naval assets with Thebes. The concord implies that some sort of naval operations were at least considered, if not actually planned. Basil II. He did not like burglars. I like Aldolf Sax, the creator of the saxophone, who kept escaping death. I'd never heard of this. I'm gonna have to look that up later, Angale, and see what wacky thing is going down. By the way, I wanted to call out Albionis for calling the Hajj Sophia ugly. Yeah. Get him. Beat him up. Defeated the entire Bulgarian army. Oh, he didn't like Bulgars. I thought you said, burglars. Not Bulgars. The Bulgarian army blinded 99 out of every 100 of them, sent them back home. Their king suffered a stroke upon seeing the state of their defeated army, and died immediately, and the entire empire collapsed. That's pretty fucked up, but pretty impressive how effective it was. Damn. I suppose it's just a genuinely, like, shocking level of brutality. While winter in the Aegean is not an ideal time to mount naval operations, it is not impossible to do so. The Allies might have been waiting for spring before sending their naval assets into action. It may also have been the case that many Athenians were obsessed with the past glory of Athens when it was a great land power. By this time, however, its population and wealth had declined to where Athens relied more on mercenaries than its own citizen hoplites. Its cavalry arm was small and trained in the old ways of Greek warfare. It was no match in either numbers or quality for the Macedonian cavalry. Still, old ideals die hard, and it's possible that Demosthenes and other Athenians saw the war as Philip to restore their national pride and reputation by fighting and winning that most traditional form of Greek warfare, a great infantry battle. If so, Theirs was a mistake of enormous proportions. Over the winter of 339-338 BC, both sides made efforts to increase their strength and sought support from their respective allies. Neither side was particularly successful, and only a small number of new troops accrued to both sides. On the one hand, Philip was disappointed in those of the Peloponnesian states that were friendly to him for so little help. On the other hand, the large coalition of Greek states that Philip feared might join Athens against him did not materialize either. Over the winter, both armies skirmished with one another across the Cephisus River, or valley, conducting raids on each other's strong points, which were hastily constructed forward on their main lines. Unless they were dispatched to secure food, they seemed to have little point to these guerrilla raids except to keep the army busy and maintain camp discipline through the long winter months. After that, he got the title of the Bulgar Slayer. I suppose you would after you cause an entire empire to collapse. Wounded soldiers are worse than dead soldiers since they need resources being kept alive. Also, Bulgar comes from the Bulgarians, like slave from Slav. Thankfully, cheeseburgers do not come from bottom; those come from Hamburg. What a dumb comment. What did he mean by this? I don't know either, do I? He's just silly. He's just silly. Still laughing over it. Okay, I'm gonna focus on actually reading because I keep getting sidetracked, and I'm not gonna get much done. So I'm gonna go crazy. As spring approached, Philip made a last attempt to reach a peaceful settlement with thieves in Athens. Philip probably knew that the die was cast and that no diplomatic solution could be found. Accordingly, he used these discussions to cast himself as the one who did not want war and was attempted to avoid it until the last possible moment. He reminded them that he was acting legally in the name of the Amphictyons, one of Greece's oldest and most venerable institutions, in punishing Amphissa for its sacrilegious actions. Philip was already looking beyond the battlefield to the public support he would need to unify Greece without bloodshed once thieves in Athens were defeated. The Allies, of course, recognized Macedonian imperialism when they saw it, and viewed the war as a defense of Greek liberty against Macedonian servitude. The Boeotian and Athenian assemblies rejected Philip's last offer of peace, and both sides resigned themselves to war. The spring of 338 BC came and went, and still both sides held their positions. Philip refused to attack. The spring and early summer offered Athens an opportunity to launch naval operations against the Macedonian coast, but unbelievably it did not do so. A few more allies trickled in small troop contingents to support thieves in Athens, so that their force now outnumbered Philip in infantry, if not in cavalry. Then, in early summer, Philip opened hostilities with an attack on the Graecia Pass. According to Polyaenus, both of our main source for the incident, Philip tricked Chares and Proxenus, the allied commanders of the 10,000 hoplite mercenaries guarding the pass, with a fake letter. Philip concocted a letter to Antipater in Macedonia saying that he was postponing the campaign against Amphissa, but he was hurrying the Thrace, since he had learned of a revolt had begun there. The courier was captured going through the narrow passes, and the letter seized by the Greek commanders, who believed it and abandoned their guards over the passes. Later, quote, Philip found the passes deserted and unguarded, burst through, defeated the generals when they turned around, and captured Amphissa. Philip used an identical ruse to the one he had employed to free his fleet during the siege of Byzantium. Chares again fell for a captured bogus letter to Antipater, saying that Philip was breaking off his campaign to put down a revolt in Thrace. Chares was an experienced soldier and a captain of mercenaries, so it was difficult to believe that he was so gullible as he was portrayed. Twice, Polyaenus' account takes on the appearance of a literary device offered to explain an event for which no other explanatory evidence is offered. We surely would have to pay higher import taxes if they came from so far to the east as Bulgaria, by giving you knowledge of things randomly. Boob is poop upside down. Thank you, son. That'll go into the history books. That will go into. Hang on. You know what? You know what? I'm gonna take a snip of that, and I'm gonna save that. There we go. Son Albionus. Great knowledge. There we go. How those small states got so much manpower. They weren't as powerful as they seemed, but people weren't so unified outside, so they had power in proportions. History in the making, boys. Yes, exactly, son. And I suppose it's sort of one of those things where it's like, in this situation, they're probably mobilizing their entire forces. Because I understand that Macedon is, manpower-wise, Macedonia and Thessaly probably outnumber the entirety of Greece. Well, not the entirety of Greece, but a large proportion of them. And as it says, a large amount of them were also mercenaries. And also, of course, the numbers could be a little bit fibbed. Although I think these are probably close. It sounds like, you know, a large empire could probably muster, you know, a solid 30,000 man army, as Philip does. The Gravia Pass connects the northern Cephisus River, or valley, with Amphissa 12 miles to the south. Like medieval kings sometimes couldn't even field even 10k soldiers. I think it's... I would definitely like to read or kind of look into how things like that worked. Although it depends on whether they were like fielding, you know, professional soldiers, or if it was just like levies. It was 10k per side combatant. I don't know about this conflict, but I know in there was a lot of people who were much less developed than others, like they just barely out of hunter-gatherer mode, and so if you have even those basic military tactics, you win easily. Yeah, just stand in a line and like fight as a group rather than as like one person. Don't just charge a wall. It's not gonna go well. The Gravia Pass connects the northern Cephisus Valley with Amphissa 12 miles to the south. It traverses the mountainous terrain for some 5 miles before debouching on a gradually widening plain leading to Amphissa 6.5 miles south. The modern road running through the pass is only 35 yards wide on average, with canyon-like walls rising steeply on either side. No level section of the pass is wide enough to accommodate an encampment of 10,000 troops, nor is there any place where even a much smaller number of troops, say 1,000, could deploy for battle. Small units acting as lookouts and pickets might find sufficient space, but the steep walls of the pass would force them to take up positions on the road itself and leave them exposed to attack. It is very unlikely that Chares deployed his mercenaries within the pass itself. Only the mouth of the pass opening in the Cephisus Valley or the far exit leading to Amphissa could have accommodated Chares' troops. On the one hand, this site places troops only 6 miles from Philip's main force, exposing them to attack by a much larger force. The narrow road to Chares' rear effectively prevented a controlled retreat. Finally, supplying 10,000 troops over a narrow mountain pass for 6 months and over the winter would have been a logistical nightmare for a Greek army. The rear exit, on the other hand, offered a gradually widening plain, more than 1,000 yards wide, that could accommodate Chares' camp if it deployed some 500 yards from where the narrow road exited the mountains. His army could easily be supplied from Amphissa, which was less than 7 miles away. Amphissa was also provided a redoubt to fall back on in case of a rout. It is more probable that Chares' army was encamped here and not in the mouth of the Gravia Pass. Polyaenus tells us that Philip found the pass deserted and unguarded, ostensibly as a result of Chares having believed Philip's bogus letter and ordering his troops to withdraw. It may have happened this way. If so, Parmenio caught Chares by surprise while he was withdrawing, because Parmenio, quote, defeated the generals when they turned around and captured Amphissa. If we remember, however, that Chares' army had been living in tents for 6 months, much of it during the winter, it is possible that the camp's strict military discipline of posting pickets when the pass had been eroded by the harsh living conditions, or had been eroded. Under these circumstances, Parmenio's cavalry column may have attacked down the road, brushed aside the pickets, and attacked Chares' camp, catching his troops at night in their tents. Chares' army was annihilated in less than 3 hours. Once Parmenio's lead units had gained the pass's exit, follow-on units would have quickly traversed the pass, reinforced the advance force, and perhaps participated in the slaughter of the mercenaries. With Chares out of the way, Parmenio and his army, probably mostly cavalry, light infantry and some mercenary hoplites, advanced south and captured Amphissa. The city formally surrendered to Parmenio, and those deemed guilty of sacrilege were banished. The mandate of the Amphictyonic League had been carried out, and the Sacred War was officially over. Parmenio continued his advance to southwest, however, capturing Naupactus. The Achaean garrison surrendered on the promise of free passage across the Corinthian Gulf to Achaea. You can see that down in the bottom left-hand side of the thing, kind of following it. The Achaean garrison surrendered on the promise of free passage across the Corinthian Gulf to Achaea. On their arrival there, however, the commander and his men were executed. Parmenio handed Naupactus over to the Aetolians, as Philip had promised when they joined his alliance. In a single stroke, Parmenio's rapid advance had rendered the allies' defences vulnerable. If Parmenio crossed the Corinthian Gulf, linked up with Philip's allies in the Peloponnese that were now willing to help since victory was in sight, and cut off the Athenian and Theban retreat as Philip attacked from the north, the allied forces would be crushed between two Macedonian field armies. In a less sweeping movement, Parmenio could turn east, capture Delphi, and seize Labadea. He could arrive behind and outflank the allied defences at Parapotami. And if Philip attacked south from Elatea, they could trap the allied armies between them. Parmenio chose the latter option, and sent cavalry columns to occupy southern focus, capturing Delphi, Kyrphus, and Anticrea before taking up positions outside Labadea. From there, Parmenio could ravage the central Boeotian plain and cut off the allied army's retreats at Parapotami. The Theban commander at Parapotami realized the danger and ordered his army to retreat 5 miles south and take up new defensive positions on the 3-mile or 3-kilometer wide plain between the Acropolis of Chaeronea and the Cephissus River. Once the allied armies were in motion, Philip moved south to join Parmenio, coming from the west. The two armies linked up just south of Parapotami, setting the stage for one of the most important battles in Western military history, the Battle of Chaeronea. Okay, I could see you guys talking a bunch. Let me have a quick skim through. Walls were an effective strategy against literally anyone who doesn't have the ability to raise a siege. That was kind of the case with Byzantium and Perinthus, because they mainly dealt with like the Getae tribes and a bunch of other tribes. They just it was like you would just have basic walls and it's like you win. Kaiser building a bridge across the Rhine or Danube was a shocking action that his enemies didn't think possible. It's like, wow, if you just put a bunch of planks down together, you're like a god to these people. Was Alexander actually gay? What I don't believe is that he died to a fever. Yes, a fever. I think I could see him being poisoned. In regards to Philip or Alexander being gay, it really depends on how you read things. There is some questionable aspects of taking specific words in Greece, and especially things like love, can have very specific meanings depending on the type of love they mean. They may mean eros, not filial love, sorry, eros being, kind of bodily love or whatever you have it. Where, sexual attraction. But there's other types of love, particularly in Greek writing, and oftentimes, to my knowledge anyway, this is the type of phrasing and those types of words that are used to describe Alexander's love of his best friends, for example. Some people point that the fact that he, there's stories of Olympias and other people trying to get him to sleep with a prostitute because they believe that he may have been gay. But then at the same time, you have to remember that Philip married to 3 women and had a child, and had at least one child with one. Um, there's a couple of other things I'd have to. I remember I looked into it before a small bit. Um, he could have been. He could very well have been. But I think people who say, "Oh, he definitely was," because I know in some recent show, they absolutely made him like 100%. I mean, didn't Alexander say that women are only good to give children? I have no idea. I don't actually know if he did. There's so many like stories about Alexander. Um, I don't remember that though. That could be one. That could be one. I'd have to know which source that's from. Uh, 4 hour arrows to the back. Yeah, just like that guy with Boeing recently. He died by 4 gunshot wounds to the head, shotgun wounds specifically. King Bradley single-handedly defeated a tank with just a sword, and retook the heavily armed capital by himself. That's not real history. Yeah, you're getting mixed up, son. Symptom of poison, most likely, so they probably weren't lying or trying to lie. Yeah, I can imagine that that was probably the case. It's a shame too. I wonder what could have happened. Well, no, I think the Empire probably would have fell apart at some point. It would have been interesting for the first couple of years to see if he could have held the Empire together. But that becomes a question of, is he as capable of Empire maintaining and politicking as Philip was? Would he have been able to take from Philip's life and apply it on an even grander scale of all of the satraps of Persia? He would have crossed the Indus. I don't. He would have conquered Japan. There is an interesting thing to be spoken of, because at the time that Philip was coming to power, there was also an Indian king who was sort of going a little crazy himself and was starting to conquer. He didn't conquer all of India, but he conquered a large portion of northern India. I can't remember his name, but he likely would have butted heads with him, and it would have been very interesting to see how a fully enforced Macedonian-led army, or Alexander-led Macedonian army, reinforced with who knows how many Persian and Thracian and all these other specialized groups that Alexander definitely would have worked towards, how they would have fared. 10 times the population. That's the thing. They could throw so many troops at them. You're talking about like a subcontinent against like parts of the Middle East and Greece, and like it's gonna be a tough war. I believe though he actually, at the time of his death, he may have had plans to go east or go west, sorry, and conquer Carthage. I think may have been his plan. He wanted to conquer Africa specifically because Carthage was there, being like pretty rich and stuff. Buddhism got to Japan unironically thanks to Alexander. If I can you should feel free to expand. He should have gone north. He would have just found a bunch of trees and a bunch of like tribal people being like shouting at him. He fought them. He did. Do you guys know? No, there's like there's a bunch of people who try and claim that Philip lost his battle at the Hydaspes against the Indian king. There's a bunch that say like it's a bunch of primarily like Indian nationalistic sentiments where it's like there's no way this happened. It's clearly just lying by the Greek because he's not mentioned anywhere in their stories. Depiction of the Buddha was made by a Hellenic kingdom near Afghanistan. I did not know that. Huh. It's very funny. Sometimes I see images of like some random Indian like emperor, and it's like he captured Caesar of the Roman Empire and took him to his capital and made him swear fealty to him. already knew how to fight elephants by the time he arrived at Hindus, so it was nothing new to him. Yeah, I think elephants are definitely strong, but like Scipio Africanus, for example, showed that like they're not undefeatable. You can literally just make a big like space in your line and like just poke at them, and they'll run through the spaces, and suddenly it's like, okay, now you just get like cavalry to harass them. You've broken up their line. They're not as dangerous, and oftentimes they'll just turn around and do damage to everyone else. Huh, I did not know that. Sunny Day Enjoyer. I will have to look into that. Um, wow, time is going way quicker. If I stop and talk, I thought I would. Hang on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. I'm finishing this chapter. I apologize if you guys are posting comments. I'm gonna get through this by the end of the stream, or at least try to. The Battle of Cheronia. The armies moved into position a few days before the battle to prepare themselves for what lay ahead. Philip himself assumed the field command of the Macedonian army, accompanied by Antipater, Parmenio, and the 18-year-old Alexander. Theagenes, a Boeotian general, was the overall commander of the allied armies. Based on his design of the allied defense and his use of terrain, Theagenes was a competent tactician. It was August, a time in Greece when the days can be suffocatingly hot and bring an army to its knees with a heat stroke and exhaustion. The armies rose early and armed themselves in the comforting cool of the pre-dawn twilight. As the sun rose, Philip's army went into the attack. The exact date of the battle is uncertain, but it was probably fought on August the 1st or August 4th in 338 BC. The armies that faced each other. The infantry contingents of the allied armies totaled 35,000 troops, of which some 30,000 were hoplite heavy infantry and the rest light infantry. There is no record of allied cavalry being present at the battle, perhaps because Theagenes' defensive infantry deployment covered the entire battlefront, leaving no place for cavalry to maneuver. That's very smart of them. Well, just by having bring a bunch of men so that you block the entire field so cavalry can't be used. The 12,000 Boeotians who were the most experienced and well-trained of the allied soldiers, and included the famous sacred band of 300 Theban elite heavy infantrymen. Athens had issued a dire call to its citizenry, and its contingents included infantry even as old as 50. Athenian numbered 10,000 soldiers along an additional 2,000 mercenaries serving under their own commanders as independent units. Corinth and Megara may have contributed 2,000 hoplites each, and some smaller contingents from Corcyra, Lacus, Arcania, Euboea may have also participated. Only Diodorus. Alexander was I thought he was like 5'4", 5'5". You're taller than Alexander Toete. Just about. Little tiny goblin. Only Diodorus provides an estimate of Philip's combat strength: 30,000 infantry and 2,000 cavalry. Philip's army comprised of 24,000 Macedonian pikemen of the king's field army, 5,000 to 6,000 light infantry, speciality units, peltast, archers, bowmen, javelineers, and so on, drawn from the subject peoples of the empire, and 2,000 Macedonian cavalry. Philip seemed to have made no use of the Thessalian cavalry at Cheronia, probably because the Thessalian cavalry was neither trained nor equipped to carry out the important tactical role that Philip had in mind for his cavalry. Diodorus tells us that Philip's army was larger, but Justin says that when the army was joined, the Athenians were far superior in number of soldiers, meaning the entire allies. Justin's source in Theopompus is probably correct. He's 1 inch taller than I am. No, Angel. Defeated, destroyed, it's over. He's like 5'4". Yeah, I felt like that was... I speak metric, what you guys are talking about. I'm sorry, Sunny Day Enjoyer. I also typically use... I tend for heights to use feet and inches. I don't know why. It makes more sense to me. Although, you know, meters also do as well. Or centimeters, I should say. The size of the armies at Cheronia was less important to the battle's outcome than their composition and combat experience. The allied armies was made up entirely of infantry, which limited its tactical options to defense and rendered it incapable of pursuit. Accordingly, the tactical initiative went to Philip. Because the Allied armies could not conduct a lethal pursuit and destroy Philip's army, he could retreat and fight another day. Thus, the Allies could not effect a strategic decision, even if they were victorious. If the victory went to Philip, however, he was capable of using his cavalry to completely annihilate the Allied armies. In preparing to fight a traditional Greek infantry battle, Theagenes apparently did not understand that Philip brought a new dimension to Greek warfare. Unlike other Greek armies, Philip's army was capable of fighting a battle of annihilation. The Macedonian army was superior in combat experience, power, and training, although the Boeotians were probably their equals in infantry. With the exception perhaps of some of the mercenaries, none of the Allied contingents had ever seen the Macedonian phalanx in action, much less fought against it. The same was true for cavalry. The Allies' combat experience against cavalry was against Greek cavalry, with its short spear and inability to deliver an effective shock against the front of the infantry phalanx. They had no conception of the murderous killing ability of the Macedonian cavalry, which was equipped with the saber and the long lance and was trained to employ the wedge formation to break through an infantry line. From the moment the Allied armies took the field, they were vulnerable to combat capabilities and tactics that most had never experienced or even imagined existed in a Greek army. There's another image I'm going to pick it up. Hello, Haru. Hello. Drown check. Thank you very much. And a hydrate redeem from Angale as well. I'll make sure to do it. Hang on, let me go grab my water. Where did I put my bottle of water? Hang on, let me find it real quick. Double down. I have to drink double the water. Hang on. I found my bottle of water. I hope you're doing well, Haru. I'm kind of speed reading right now. A little bit, because it's taken a while. I want to get at least this chapter done. Let me quickly do this. Boom. We got another image. This time we got a map. We got a battle map. And I'll read out what it says, but you guys can... the Macedonians are on the left and the Allied infantry are on the right. The Chaeronian plain is 3 kilometers wide at the battle site. Standing in the center of the Allied lines and looking north, one sees the plain to the right, the east, and the terminatus of the steep banks and marshy grounds of the Cephissus River. A brook, probably the Haemon, which a Chaeronian native Plutarch mentioned and identified with the modern Lycurgus stream, marked the western left boundary of the left battlefield. So, hang on, let me get my point. The Cephissus River here, and I think there's another stream around this region, arguing to kind of mark the other boundary. You ate too many sweets? Oh no, Haru's super hyper. Forward of the brook and to the left, the terrain sloped upward to a rise, atop of which sat the Acropolis of Chaeronea. The Karata Pass behind the battlefield probably provided a route of retreat for the Allied units located on the left and center of the line. The Allied force of 35,000 infantry, deploying 8 men deep, ran the entire length of the battlefield. Its left flank was anchored on the Haemon stream. Its light infantry deployed to control the sloping ground leading to the Acropolis, and the sacred band positioned on the extreme right, just as any typical Greek army is the strongest force on the right. The Athenian phalanx, some 10,000 strong, occupied the ground on the left of the line, and the Boeotian contingent of 12,000 men deployed to their right, with the Allied infantry occupying the entire battlefront. Theagenes may have reckoned that he had taken Philip's cavalry out of the fight. since it had no room in which to maneuver on the flanks, that he had transformed the battle into a pure infantry contest. Where was I? The idea that the Macedonian cavalry could attack dead-on from the front was simply beyond Theagene's tactical imagination. The book has a lot of maps. You're jelly. My book said we'll have one or two at the back of the book at most, and they're always completely indecipherable. Yeah, this is one thing I quite like about this book. It has a lot of maps. They're quite nice to look at. Philip's tactical deployment was offensive in nature, designed to take the battle to the Allies with shock and maneuver. At the extreme right of the Macedonian line, Philip placed his light infantry, whose mission was to sweep the Allied light infantry off the Acropolis hill and protect Philip's main units. The first infantry unit on the right of the line was the King's Guard, consisting of 500 elite companion infantry who were recruited from the Macedonians of the Old Kingdom and spoke the Macedonian dialect as a sign of their elite status and loyalty to the king. Next was Philip's Royal Hypaspis Guard, 1,000 strong and recruited from the Macedonians drawn from the upper cantons. 2 additional brigades of these troops were posted near the king. The rest of the infantry line comprised 14 infantry brigades, each 1,500 men strong, with half drawn from the Old Kingdom, Pez-heteroi, and half from the upper cantons, Atesteroi. Each of the brigade was named for its commanding officer. All of Philip's infantry that day was armed with the sarissa. Philip's infantry line took up 2.5 kilometers across the plain. Except for the units directly across from the Athenians, the Macedonian line deployed in its traditional array of 10 men deep. Philip placed his 2,000 cavalry to the left and directly opposite the sacred band and the rest of the Theban Boeotian line. Diodorus tells us that Alexander placed Philip in command on the left, but stationed alongside him the most important of his commanders, probably Parmenio and Antipater. Philip himself, keeping his specially selected men by his side, i.e. the King's Guard and elite infantry units, had charge of the other wing. He also placed the individual units wherever the circumstances required them, i.e. the light infantry. Philip was protected by his Somotophylaces, or bodyguard, or 7 senior cavalrymen, whom he sometimes also used as messengers to carry his orders to units along the line. No ancient source mentions the presence of cavalry at Chaeronea, and while Diodorus implies Alexander was in command, he does not expressly say so. Although the sources are silent on this issue, we can conclude from the evidence that cavalry was involved in the battle. First, we know from the sources that Philip had 2,000 cavalry with him. Second, Parmenio, or Alatea, before the battle. Second, Parmenio's raid on the Athenian camp, his capture of Amphissa, and his outflanking of the Athenian line at Parapotami were accomplished with a mixed force including cavalry. Thus, Parmenio had cavalry with him when he linked up with Philip prior to the battle. Third, no sane commander would have neglected to use his cavalry and leave his infantry considerably outnumbered by the enemy infantry. Without his cavalry, Philip would not have been able to extend his line completely across the Allied front, with 1 or 2 flanks would have been left open to envelopment. Fourth, Philip sent Parmenio and Antipater to assist Alexander on the left of the line. Both senior commanders were cavalry officers. It would have made no sense to send them if Alexander was in command of only infantry. Finally, the speed with which the battle developed after Alexander's force penetrated the Allied line implies the use of cavalry both to encircle the sacred band and to block the retreat of the Theban and Boeotian elements of the Allied line. If Alexander's force was infantry moving in phalanx formation, they could hardly have moved into position in time to bar the Thebans' flight. For these reasons, modern scholars have tended to agree that Alexander was in charge of cavalry at Chaeronea. How old was Alexander at this battle? I believe he was about 19 years of age, or like 17? Somewhere in his teens, I'm quite sure. Philip opened the attack by sending his light infantry forward to clear the Acropolis to his right. So, here. I'm quite sure. Let me, I think it's somewhere in the teens. I don't know if he was in the middle teens or late teens. So I might read those numbers very quickly. So one, and the words are very small actually. Philip withdraws his infantry is number 1, and the Greeks' hoplites follow, stretching the Allied line. 2. Alexander's cavalry penetrates the Allied line, falling upon its centre and rear. 3. Philip orders his infantry to attack the Allied left and centre. And 4. Alexander wheels his cavalry to attack the now isolated Sacred Band. That's just those kind of 4 kind of points there, if you guys were wondering what they said, if you couldn't read it. Where were we? Oh, yes. The infantry of Philip's right wing and under his command began to advance towards the Athenian left, which was now commanded by Stratocles. The rest of Philip's line, the centre infantry, and Alexander's cavalry began to advance only after Philip moved, with the result that the entire line was going to contract at the oblique. To ensure maximum coverage across the front of the Athenian phalanx, Philip's infantry was arranged in a rectangular formation. Polyaenus tells us, however, that Philip's phalanx was contracted. When the 10 men deep phalanx contracted, the men of the last 5 ranks moved into the spaces between the men of the first 5, effectively doubling the spear points directed at the enemy while keeping the length of the phalanx front consistent. The hedgehog of spears became thicker, making the phalanx heavier and more difficult to penetrate. Philip advanced just short of making contact with the Athenians and then halted. Quote, as Philip's lines faced the Athenians, he gave way, and while the Athenians advanced hot-foot, retired step by step with his phalanx contracted and his men protected by a hedge of spears. As Philip retreated, the Athenians moved forward out of line and followed. Philip withdrew slowly and to his right until gaining some high ground, he attacked the Athenians vigorously. We can't read it, apologies. This high ground was probably, quote, the elevation of a dike that enclosed the waters of the Lycuresi stream when it was in flood. Philip's retrograde movement lasted about 30 minutes and covered 150 meters to the rear and 50 to his right. The time was enough for the Macedonian infantry advancing in the center and Alexander's cavalry advancing on the left, both of which lagged behind Philip at the oblique, to reach the Allied line. Thus, when Philip stopped his retreat and began his attack, his infantry and cavalry made contact simultaneously all across the Allied line. The entire Allied front was suddenly engaged. As soon as Alexander's cavalry came online, it went immediately into the attack. According to Diodorus, Alexander and his men were the first, or, quote, Alexander and his men were the first to force their way through those arrayed against them and put them to flight, and first opened up a gap in the enemy line with the support of the many brave men contending by his side. As they had done many times before, the fierce Macedonian cavalry cut through the infantry line, gaining the enemy rear in short order. Arrian, himself a Roman cavalry commander, tells us that Philip had trained his cavalry to employ the Thracian wedge formation, quote, the front tapering into a point that made it possible easily to cut through enemy hostile formation. A Macedonian cavalry squadron in wedge formation had 120 horsemen. A squadron was 20 ranks deep, with the last rank being the widest at 20 cavalrymen across, or a length of 50 meters. Alexander could have deployed 5 cavalry wedges across the 500-meter front afforded him, or a force of 600 horses, with an adequate space between them for maneuver. This tactic left some 1,400 cavalrymen to be arranged in rectangular formations behind the line in the wedges. Once the wedges had punched through the infantry line, the follow-on cavalry burst through in strength. We may reasonably take from Diodorus that Alexander commanded one of the cavalry wedges. Had balls, you gotta give him that. Perhaps too many. He was certainly... I think he genuinely believed that the stories are to be told, are to be believed. I think he genuinely believed that he was son of a god and invincible. The preceding description of the Battle of Chaeronea diverges from the usual descriptions offered. I have suggested that the reasons for Philip's advance, retreat, and counterattack were to loosen and disrupt the Athenian phalanx, rendering it easy to shatter upon counterattack, and to afford the rest of his infantry and cavalry the time to take their positions to attack the allies simultaneously along the line. Instead, the traditional view is that Philip's maneuver was intended to draw the Athenian line forward and to the left, and stretch the Allied infantry line so that a gap opened at its far end. When this break occurred, the Sacred Band did not abandon its strong positions along the bank of the Cephissus River to close it. Alexander's cavalry attacked through this breach, gaining the Allied rear. The traditional explanation probably arose for two reasons. First, Diodorus's phrase, "Alexander first opened a gap in the enemy line," establishes that a gap was created in the Allied line. Second, our main sources for the battle, Diodorus and Polyaenus, were not military men, and accepted the Greek and later Roman conventional wisdom that cavalry could not penetrate the infantry phalanx from frontal assault. Thus, something other than Alexander's cavalry attack must have caused a break in the line. Neither Diodorus nor Polyaenus offers an explanation as to how the gap was created. The argument that it happened because the Allied infantry line extended in response to Philip's tactical withdrawal appears to be a result of modern scholarship and not based on the evidence of the ancient texts. An analysis of the dynamics of an expanding infantry line shows that the length of Philip's tactical retreat was simply insufficient to create a gap in the 3-kilometer Allied infantry line. If Johannes Cromayer and George Veith are correct, Philip retreated 150 meters to the rear and 50 to his right, over some 30 minutes. I don't know how would they calculate that type of stuff. They'd probably just have to reenact it, wouldn't it? The forward movement of the Athenian phalanx would have had no effect on the length of the 3,000-meter Allied line. Instead, it would have simply pivoted slightly forward on its far end. The only movement that could have stretched the line to break was its 50-meter shift to the Athenian left as it followed Philip backward and to his right. A leftward movement, or 50 meters, would have forced the entire line to adjust by slightly more than 1% of its length. On average, then, to keep the line intact, every soldier would have had, that's very oddly phrased. On average, then, to keep the line intact, each soldier in the line would have had to move to his left a mere 5 inches, which is shorter distance than we would expect to occur randomly in a normal shuffling of soldiers in a packed formation. The distance is simply insufficient to create a large enough gap for Alexander's cavalry squadrons to ride through. Even if one concedes that the Allied line stretched and broke, the result would produce a gap of only 50 meters, which would only accommodate the width of a single Macedonian cavalry squadron arranged in Thracian formation. Alexander's successful cavalry attack against the Allied infantry line, therefore, must have happened because of other reasons. Philip's counterattack drove the Athenian phalanx back until it lost its cohesion and broke, trapping 3,000 Athenian hoplites in a nearby cul-de-sac. 1,000 of them were killed and 2,000 taken prisoner. The other men escaped over the Karata Pass, gaining safety in Lebedae. The Macedonian infantry in the line's center held the Boeotians in place with a fixed close order fixing attack, while Alexander's cavalry squadrons pushed through the Allied line, swung to the right, and drove behind the Boeotian infantry, trapping them against the Macedonian line. With no escape, the Boeotians and Thebans suffered the heaviest casualties of all the Allied contingents. Alexander led some cavalry squadrons to the left, trapping the Sacred Band against its own defensive positions. Then, his cavalry fell upon it, killing every man. Plutarch tells us, "It is said, moreover, that band was never beaten until the battle of Chaeronea, when, after the battle, Philip was surveying the dead. He stopped at the place where the 300 were lying, all where they had faced and met his sarissæ with their armor, mingled one with another. He was amazed." Although to those involved the fight must have seemed to last an eternity, it was probably over within a few hours. If the Athenians, facing only Philip's pikemen, and with a clear line of retreat, suffered 30% casualties, the other Allied contingents must have experienced far greater losses. Deployed next to the destroyed Boeotians, the Achaeans must have also suffered greatly. The Arcanians in the center line broke under the Macedonian infantry's attack and fled the battle. The remaining Boeotians' retreat was clogged by the fleeing Athenians, and quickly blocked by Philip's advancing infantry. With nowhere to go, the Boeotians and Thebans suffered horribly until they surrendered on the field. With Athens defeated, only Thebans and Boeotian league remained capable of opposing Philip. However, with the destruction of their armies, along with many of their leading politicians at Chaeronea, it greatly reduced this capability. Philip could have pursued the Athenians, killing many of their leaders, including Demosthenes and the members of the anti-Macedonian faction that had opposed him for so long. But Chaeronea was one of the few battles where Philip did not unleash a lethal pursuit. Philip had other things in mind for the Athenians. Philip's victory at Chaeronea was a tactical masterpiece of planning, command, and timing. Until Chaeronea, Greek generals had fought in the ranks with their troops and often were in the front ranks to set a brave example. Once the generals gave the order to advance, however, they were no longer able to exercise command and control over the battlefield or their troops. Philip was the first Greek general to command his forces from outside the battle space, where he could orchestrate the timing and direction of his forces. For Philip's tactical plan to work at Chaeronea, he had to be in a position to carry out 3 tasks. First, he had to coordinate the movement of his light infantry. After eliminating the Athenian light infantry holding the Acropolis hill on his right, his infantry then had to press forward and to the right to make room for the follow-on deployment of his heavy pike infantry. Next, he had to coordinate the movements of his own phalanx in the brigade on his immediate left, to ensure that his retrograde movement did not lose contact with the main line, which would move forward at the oblique. Third, he had to be able to see Alexander's cavalry as it came online and went into attack, so Philip could halt his retrograde movement and go on the offensive shortly after Alexander made contact with the enemy line. To accomplish 3 tasks, Philip needed to see the battlefield and to communicate with his troop commanders, either by voice or trumpet call. He also had to move freely up and down the line, at least from his far right to his left, where his guard brigades joined the middle brigades. His bodyguards may have been used as messengers to carry instructions to commanders farther down the line. To do it all successfully, Philip had to be on horseback and not, as in some previous battles, on the ground with his elite infantry. Mounted close behind and within earshot of the king's guard, and with his lateral movement preserved, Philip orchestrated the timing and maneuver of his key units. Philip's tactical command performance at Chaeronea was, quote, an illustration of what could be done by the phalanx in the hands of a master. And that ends that chapter, with chapter 9 being titled The End of Philip. And we will get into that in a later stream, as it's almost half 12 at night. Oh, there's even one more map. Yay. We get one more map, but I hope you all enjoyed. I think it's interesting to see kind of two different views as to the way the battle went, or why certain things happened the way they did. Such as that discussion on the opening in the gap. Thank you for reading for us. Thank you for joining today, and thank you for all of those who are able to stick around. It's always very much appreciated. We're gonna look for someone to raid into, I think. I know I usually read quite late, so many people probably have to go to the bed. Thank you for joining as well, Angale. Aw, thank you. I'm gonna try and do something not ASMR, or I might just make it just chatting so that people don't try and fall asleep, because I want to be able to raid into some of my other friends who, and not just people who are doing ASMR. Sweet dreams, Rue. Aw, thank you, Angale. I certainly will, I'm sure. Who to raid, I wonder, though. Let me do a quick skim. Oh, ooh. What's Momomo doing? Eh? Maybe I should do. Okay, I do apologize to anyone who is enjoying the sounds, but we're gonna raid into my friend Momomo. He is an octopus VTuber. You guys will see what I mean in a moment. It's not some big like weird model. It's a really great model. He appears to be ranking segs or no segs. So I have no idea what's happening in that stream. You might like him, Toete, though. Momomo, Momomo, VT. Oh, I did not mean to unraid. Momo 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 is a big weird octopus though. He's a pretty cool octopus though. Momo 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 Momo. You have to say his full name. It's at least like 5 Momos, and you have to say it like 8 times. But thank you all for joining me as always. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope I'll be able to see you guys again for the last chapter. Gareb Mila Magat and Slongafoil. Oh, I almost stopped stream instead of raiding. That would have been a